everybody, it's Romania Black, and I woke up this morning and thought, you know what would be great to watch? The Great Pretender. Especially since we're starting this brand new case, Singapore Sky. Oh, Makoto, oh, sweet Edamura, you thought you could get away. But Laurent is not going to let you get away so easily. So yeah, Laurent, as per usual, because as Abbie says, he's thinking below the waist, will not let Edamura go. He has concocted this grand scheme to be involved in these air races to try to swindle out $200 million from these oil tycoons. That seems a bit high stakes. It's even more high stakes than the last case by tenfold. And how? But Edamura, I don't know. At first I was like, when Laurent said, well, you could just be my mechanic, I'm like, you knew it wasn't going to end there. So I'm like, Makoto, come on now. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen with this case and how we're going to develop it, because we've got the gang assembled. We have Cynthia, we have Abigail, we have Laurent, and we have Ed. So what are we going to do from here? So lots of questions, and we just got out of a 2-year time skip. It's been fun, and we're only 7 episodes in. We are nowhere near halfway through the series, so we're just starting the next little jaunt in this series, right? I feel like if we're going with the 3-act structure, or maybe we should be looking at a 4-act structure with this, like in Japanese fiction. Maybe we should be doing that. But if we're doing a 4-act structure, then you would have, 6 episodes per thing, because this is like a 24, 25 episode series. So, the first case that we had was setting up our characters, setting them up, setting up their mental states, setting up their character definitions, and then the conflict is that they're con men, and Ed is trying to get away from that, and he just can't do it. It's just not happening for him. So we'll say that this first 6 episodes we just got through was setting up our characters in the initial act, and this next one is developing those characters and the act and seeing what we do with that. So we'll treat it like a 4-act structure. I'm okay with that. So this starts out our next part where we've gotten our characters assembled, we've learned a little bit about them, and now we're going to apply them into the story and see what we get. So I'm excited. I do have one comment before we start, though, from Brianna A. Brianna A said that there actually was a manga created after this show that was for it, which sounds interesting. I don't know if I wouldn't react to it because it's a manga based on the show itself, but apparently it did take place after the show. But as far as they know, it might have been discontinued. It may not still be ongoing. So that's something I might research once I finish the show and be like, I wonder what the manga was about, and if it was different or if it was just a manga adaptation of the anime. I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens with it. But we only have 1 season, technically, of Great Pretender, so we'll see, right? But I'm curious, y'all. I'm excited to see what goes down this episode. I hope y'all are too. So, without further ado, we are going to start episode 7 of The Great Pretender. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh, so yeah, getting Abbie backstory, and I wanted to bring out Whiteboard Coon because we're starting to get into our character motivations of why our characters are doing the things that we're doing. Now, obviously, we got Ed first. Like, we got Edamura, we got his whole backstory first, the thing about his dad, his mother, everything. We know the most about Makoto, which makes sense because he's our main protagonist. Laurent is the most mysterious. He seems to just be doing it for the fun of it, but Laurent is so good at hiding his real emotions, and there's like little tiny nuances in this episode where you start to see like he plays everything off so coolly, but then when things start to happen, like he doesn't outright show emotion, but you see him get like a little bit more tense, a little bit more like serious. And so with Laurent, I feel like if we're going to find anything out about him, it's going to be the very last one. He's going to be the last person we find out stuff about. It's going to bookend with Makoto and Laurent being our guys that we find out stuff about, because they're literally a pair. And then Cynthia, we assume that Cynthia is doing this all for the money, right? I'm assuming we may find out backstory about her as well. We seem to know little tiny things about her and her past, like she's lived in London, things like that. But Abbie Abbie has been set up from the start of doing this seemingly for the thrill of it. We got the whole thing with the dirt bikes and stuff, but all that foreshadowing that Laurent's like she's doing this to die, like she's just thrill seeking because she wants to. She doesn't want to kill herself, but she's literally self-destructing, hoping to be. She's like longing for death nearly, which is really sad because I like Abbie's character a lot. But it makes sense now with the motorbike, with everything, like why she's so thrill seeking. She's just chasing after death, and it's like, oh my gosh. But yeah, that whole opening with the orange sky and seeing like her parents, we see she has the ballerina bun. I said ballet artist in the reaction, but she has the ballerina bun, and then we see her in the military and like the comrade of hers dying. Yeah, this show is not afraid to dabble in some darker, more mature themes, but it has that like great pretender charm surrounding it that you're kind of like, oh, this is still a really good show. And then it dabs into some serious stuff, right? And so Abbie clearly is she's struggling quite a bit. The animation in this episode, again, I feel the show is so underrated because it looks gorgeous. The cinematography, the design of it, everything is so good. I'm like, I wish more people were talking about this show because it's really, really good. I love it. And I could sit there and like watch and do screen caps of the show all day, right? But just even the style of the air race and everything, it's so good. Donald Rodriguez. Okay. We need to talk about Laurent and Makoto because I'm really only going to be using this board mainly for Abbie and the race, and that's kind of it. But Laurent with the boba tea and the indirect kiss with Makoto, you're not subtle, right? And then the idea of the umbrella. I really thought that Laurent would offer Makoto the umbrella. But here's the thing with Laurent. I guess we'll put Laurent and Makoto over here in a corner. Laurent and Makoto. Laurent is very much, he's pushy and he wants to get his way and he's willing to do anything to get his way. But at the same time, he does not try too hard to noticeably, here's the thing, he doesn't try too hard to noticeably go out of his way for Makoto. That's the thing. He is there with the umbrella. He's there with the tea. He's there with all the things. If Makoto wants it, he's like, here you are. But if you don't want it, I'm not going to push it on you. He's very passive aggressively pushing. He's like, here's my things. But he's not taking that plunge to like say, I'm doing this for you. Laurent is very much seeming like the type of character that does not want to admit that he cares about something truly. And I think that obviously will have something to do with maybe the ED, the woman in it, maybe Laurent's backstory that we will not get until like the end of this series. He's a very mysterious character. I don't blame him though. As someone who is a pale person, I understand having the umbrella outside in the sunlight, not wanting to age his skin. Laurent is kind of vain and values his appearance and does not want to, he does not want to age, right? Which could be a sign that he's older than Makoto a bit, and he doesn't want to seem like he's older than Makoto because there's that age difference. Just putting that out there, right? But he's like, they're having a dogfight over an urban area. It's the craziest race ever. Yeah. So we want to talk about our dudes here. We'll get past the intro here. Skip that there intro of Singapore sky. And so, yeah, I like Makoto asks about the umbrella. And he's like, it's to quit aging, right? He doesn't want to showcase that, right? Especially when we get, and immediately after we have him talking about not wanting to age, we have Clark and Sam. Okay. Clark, the younger brother, does not seem as savvy towards the business decisions his brother is making. Let me put it that way. Clark seems like he's kind of a himbo. He's kind of an idiot, but he's a handsome idiot, right? He is handsome and aloof and a good pilot. He's really talented, right? He is the brawn of the operation. He's the one putting out the grunt work, doing the piloting, doing all that. And he seems like a fairly nice guy. Like he's just chasing after women and being a turd, but he's innocent. It's harmless. That's the best word for it. He seems harmless. And I know that that's kind of naive to say because these two guys are involved in this big giant rigged industry where they're swindling people out of money, but he does seem he seems more innocent about it. Now, whether he is or not, maybe he'll show his true colors, but him watching the whole race with Abbie and him like just bouncing after her around the pool like Thumper and Bambi, I'm like, you just seem like he seems Twitter-pated. He seems harmless, I guess is the best way I could say, as innocent. He's kind of naive, right? He's just, clearly Sam is the one running the show, the older brother. And the older brother, they're only older by 2 years, but he looks infinitely older, right? Which I guess the stress of running this con would do that to you. Maybe that's why Laurent is trying not to age, because the stress of all the con jobs is making him age. He's like, I want to avoid it as much as possible. But Sam is the brains, right? He is the brains of the operation. And he is the promoter. He's also sexist as hell. But we'll talk about that. We'll get to that. But yeah, he's the brains of the operation, and he's the promoter, and he's the one doing all the paperwork, whereas Clark just does the piloting, and that's it. Now, here's the thing. Makoto talking about how he's more handsome in person, like him being jealous of Clark. It's kind of funny. He almost looks like Kudo with his expression there. And Laurent's like, well, he's a 25-year-old undefeated champion. Like, look at him. He's also an air race idol, like has all the girls. And I like that Makoto's like, he looks like he'll break into song. Like he looks like a pop idol. And then he looks up to his older brother. So visually, you just saw like the metaphor if he looks up to Sam. Like Clark doesn't realize that Sam is maybe more nefarious than he seems, and he looks up to his big brother. And then you have the opposite metaphor where Sam is looking down on everyone on the racetrack. Like he's the one that's in charge of this whole thing and is possibly the one behind all the cons and is the one that's has the most dirt on his hands, right? The team tournament organizer. Now, Laurent says that they were princes in their homeland, but they were chased out and disowned. So I feel like that's pretty noteworthy that they were disowned princes. Which probably means they have brothers who are still in their homeland and still in charge of things. So they're probably not the oldest of the siblings. And so they could afford to be disowned. And I like that Makoto says serves them right. Which granted, yeah, they're conning a bunch of people out of it. So Makoto would think that, right? And Clark just doesn't seem to get what the deal is. He's like, he just has this outstanding ability as a womanizer, right? And the older one has the talent. But Sam definitely is more nefarious with how he acts around Cynthia, whereas Clark is just kind of like, I feel like Clark is a womanizer, but he's not. I don't really have as much of a problem with Clark because he seems rather naive and innocent about it, right? He's not trying to force himself upon anybody. He's just like, oh, hey, like just, and the girls are all kind of around him, so it's kind of consensual, right? And the whole thing with Abbie is absolutely hilarious, and he clearly is infatuated with her. And so they rebooted this whole air race to be their own thing. I want to go to the alley and get boba tea. The fake promotion of this thing, the alley where it says it's time for tea. I freaking love that little elk on there. I want to go there. It's great. And so I like that Laurent is like, oh, here you go. You can have this tea. And so we have the tiger chopsticks, which that looks like, isn't that one of the movies that was Cassano's? And then Neo Snow White. I like it. And so they turned it around with money. They paid the opponents to make them lose. So it's rigged. Yes. I like they're just talking about this out in the open and nobody's paying attention. But so basically my question is, how are they the con, they're going to take 200 million. So are they going to bet Abigail versus Clark and bet for Abigail to win? I feel that's what's going to happen. They are going to bet for Abigail to win, and they're going to, and Sam, who thinks he's going to rig it to where Abigail may be put out of her misery is probably gonna be like, oh yeah, we'll bet all of our money on this race, and then Abigail's hopefully gonna win. Or maybe that won't be the case. Maybe that they'll bet that Abigail would win. But I don't think so. I think Sam is gonna try to rig it to where Abigail's playing like something bad happens to it, and she ends up like ducking out of the race, and that'll allow Clark to win. But that's the big question, is how are they going to get their $200 million? Like, this whole episode does not focus on that at all. They never bring up the con. They don't talk about it at all. They just are trying to get Abigail versus Clark in the final. That's the only thing that has been the goal of this episode. So we, the audience, have no clue how this con is going to play out, right? But I worry about Abigail, because I'm like, she is being put in a place of danger, and she seems okay with that, but I feel like Makoto's going to be like, no, this is not right. You shouldn't try to kill yourself, Abigail. This is not good. Right? So, he's like, if you put it negatively, it's rigged. And he's like, if you put it nicely, it's scripted entertainment. I like that Laurent always has an ulterior motive of how to word things. Like, how do we phrase this in a more positive way? He's like, you could look at it as a con, or you could look at it as we're helping the people. Like Laurent tries to find a way to spin everything to his advantage, right? And so Sam controls the race results. So yeah, and Clark keeps shining as the undefeated prince. So yeah, Clark is basically the mastermind behind it all, or Sam is the mastermind, and Clark is just the one that's the vehicle, literally, for the con. All right, and then I like that Laurent just offers the boba like slowly to Makoto. Makoto's just like ignores it. Like, he just offers it like, hey, you want a drink? And the pilots don't mind, because they're profiting. Like, they don't mind losing because they're making money. And then he talks about the only one that was against it, which was the Raging Bull. And the thing about it is, the one thing I love is that they talk about Raging Bull, that he was this pilot that had a big sense of pride, but he was happy taking the money in the end because he was donating it to humanitarian aid. He comes across as this big grump, but he actually was this humanitarian. And that's so funny, because there's an instructor that I work with that he is this big gruff guy, and he seems so intimidating. He seems like he's angry all the time. But then when you get to talking to him, he's the biggest teddy bear and like the nicest person in the world. And you're like, oh, it's all a big front, right? He's just trying to look like a tough guy, right? That's what the Raging Bull man reminded me of instantly. And then one day he got fed up, decided he didn't want the money anymore, and was going to take on Clark. And I like the metaphor of, as it starts to storm and get rainy, then it rains. As it starts to storm, we're getting into the darker part of the story. And I like that Laurent's like, do you want to go inside? And oh man, I take a picture of that look that Laurent gives him with the umbrella, like, where he's like, you want to stand under my umbrella? You want to go inside? Like, just like that flirty look. Oh my gosh. And Makoto's like, absolutely not. I love the look that they give each other. Like, Laurent's like, come on. And Makoto's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stand out here. And he says, well, he's better than you at least. I love Makoto, just him not admitting that, him not wanting to admit anything to Laurent. It's absolutely great. I'm just waiting for it. And so Laurent says, with acting sense and a villain's face, he was a suitable bad guy. And he just keeps on with the story. And the fans cheer when he loses according to the script. And he says, but Louis, the Raging Bull, finally changed his tune. And that's when Sam orchestrated him losing. And so, of course, I'm glad he didn't die. For a second, I was like, oh, well, maybe he'll be fine. No, and he's hauled off on a stretcher, right? And they find out that Sam orchestrated the whole thing. He orchestrated him losing. Sam sensed the revolt and punished him. And Makoto, it's like Laurent reels him in. Makoto's like, well, then what happened to Louis? And I like that Laurent's just so serious. He says, well, he miraculously survived, but he'll be in a wheelchair for life. And I like that he's so serious, and Makoto's he's like, oh, the rain stopped. And that's when Makoto takes the dang boba tea and drinks it all. Like he just basically the metaphor of him literally taking the bait. Like Laurent reeled him in with that story, and Makoto's like, fine, we're gonna take him down. Like that got him on board. Now the funny thing is gonna be if Lewis is actually totally fine and it was just a lie to reel Makoto in to make him want to take Sam down. I would be mad at Laurent if that was the case, right? If that were the case. But Makoto, his good, kind heart, can't stand the idea of this man Sam like conning these people and actually literally hurting them. Because that's the thing with Laurent and them so far. They've done these cons, but they've not intentionally tried to hurt anyone, right? Sam nearly killing Lewis, who's a kind-hearted person trying to do the right thing, that got Makoto, right? That makes him be like, nope, this guy's got to go down. I love that he literally drinks the whole boba tea. And then he's like, I'll help, but just this once. Famous last words. Makoto, when he's like, just quotation marks, just this once. Sure, Jan. You're just going to help him just this once. Okay. I'm sure that's how it'll be. I'm sure that's how it'll end up, right? Okay. As he's like, now you're talking. Well, let's help her bring down Clark. Which honestly, yeah, Clark's the one that's just doing the job for Sam, right? Now, at this point, when Abigail starts to go off track because she's having PTSD and freaking out, I do like that as she's veering off track, Makoto freaks out and he's like, oh, what's going on? And he's like getting really emotional and over the top. Laurent has like the little sweat drop, but Laurent does not say anything. He's like, how much do you think we're investing in all this? He gives off, if you've ever seen Devil Wears Prada, Laurent gives off Meryl Streep vibes when she's like, what are we doing? like, why aren't we ready? Like, just gives off that, like, just kind of passive aggressive, like, just sickly honey poison kind of tone. That is Laurent. It's like, why is no one ready? Like that's Laurent in this moment. And Makoto is genuinely worried about Abigail. Like she manages to make it past the preliminaries. But I love that Makoto, his good heart is worried about Abigail. And the thing about Laurent is that, like, Makoto's worried about Abigail. The thing about Laurent has known Abbie long enough. I do think he genuinely thinks about Abigail, but he also thinks that she's a grown woman that can probably make her own decisions. And so Laurent is very hands-off. He's like, as long as she wants to be part of this con, we'll let her. We need her. But she's making these choices. She's an adult. I'm not going to dissuade her. Whereas Makoto is very much like, no, we've got to help her. Like, they're totally different in terms of how they handle that situation, right? And even as she's stumbling out of the plane and getting hauled off to the grass, Laurent's like, oh, she's just tired. And Makoto's like, but whenever he says, I'm sure she's just tired, we cut to his face and he actually looks very serious. Like Laurent knows there's something else going under the surface, but he doesn't want to admit that he's thinking about it. Laurent very much does not want to admit any weakness or any sign of emotional attachment. That is the thing too. Makoto is easily able to get emotionally attached and manage it. And I feel like Laurent kind of maybe envies Makoto for that. Like, you can get so attached emotionally and still be a con man. How? Because Laurent does not want to seem emotionally attached. And I'm sure that relates to his ever mysterious past that we're not going to find out about till later. But he does not want to seem like he's emotionally connected to these people. It's just a game. It's just a con. It's nothing else. Whereas it very much could be something else. He just doesn't want to admit it. So yeah. And then Makoto calls him out. He's like, you're irresponsible. He's like, you're so irresponsible about Abbie. And that breaks Laurent out of the trance where he's like, oh, what? Like, he puts on the face again. He puts on the act again. He's like, what are you talking about? And Makoto's like, well, look at that. All she can do is operate that thing. Like, Makoto's like, she's clearly in distress. And the thing of it is, Laurent knows that, but he doesn't want to show that he knows, right? Or that he cares. He doesn't want to let that go. He's like, part of the act is that her and Cynthia are a duo. And Makoto's like, have you not ever watched sports anime? Don't you know that it's not just being good? You have to get to the finals. It's not going to be easy. Like, Makoto's taking all of his sports anime knowledge and trying to thrust it upon Laurent. And Laurent's like, oh, she can do it. And Makoto's like, how? And he's like, because she has Cynthia. And I do love, poor Abigail looks like just a little drowned cat where she has like her little cat face. And like someone pointed out in the comments, her hair popping up looks like little cat ears. But Cynthia trying to like make a show for Sam, right? Trying to use her feminine wiles to get his attention. And Laurent's like, well, these brothers, they like sports cars, they like cool planes, they like lasagna, they like online games, which seems like a Clark thing, lasagna and online games. And they like gambling and women. Yeah. Sam though does not look very convinced. Sam looks like he's been around the block long enough to know when girls are trying to like, when the femme fatales have tried to come after him. He doesn't seem convinced at all. I was honestly waiting for it to come out that Sam was gay, to be perfectly honest, and him to be like, I'm not interested in women. Nice try. I was waiting for that. That's what I thought that was going to be the twist in this episode, was that Sam was not into women at all. So Cynthia's wiles were not going to do anything to him. And that may very well be the case. We just don't get confirmation of it. Clark, on the other hand, is like, he's literally like in Bambi, he's Twitter-pated. He's just thinking, like, girls are just all he's thinking about. But Sam is like not convinced at all. I do love the beautiful shot of like the night sky, the skyline in this, and the way that they animate the water with the colors and the shapes. It's very pretty. And so we get Clark saying this monologue. He says, take a look, the view from up here is so beautiful. And he says, yet the ground is overflowing with ugly realities. I like that Clark is the one to say this, where he says the world continues to decay with ethnic conflicts, racism, and poverty gaps. All humans are supposed to be equal, right? So I made a decision. I'm going to treat you all, embrace you all equally. Like, yeah, these girls are like, oh, look at, he's so hot. But honestly, Clark knowing about the disparities of the world is rather interesting. I mean, he twists it to make a joke out of it, to be like, oh, I'll love all you girls equally. I'm not monogamous. But I find it interesting that Clark understands what's going on, and he just chooses to be like, this is just, I mean, we just managed to make it. We started from the bottom, now we're here, but that is not the case at all. They were princes to start with, so not quite the case, right? But he at least understands what's going on. He's not an idiot, right? I say he's a dummy when it comes to women and stuff, but he's not an idiot in reality. Clark kind of knows what's up. Sam, even more so. I like that woman says, you're so full of shit. Like, she tells Clark that. Ridiculous. And Sam's like, come on, wrap it up. Let's go. Again, it would not surprise me if Sam was just not into women at all. Would not surprise me. And Clark's like, well, come on. He's like, well, I'm going to win the race no matter what. And Sam says it's not enough just to win. He's like, we have to keep up appearances on social media. So at this point, what I think is funny is that Makoto is getting on all these social media accounts and making all these fake comments to like try to stir up Sam and realize that people want to shake things up. They want a new race. They don't want it to be the same old, same old. And if you look, Makoto has the same boba tea. He's got the same boba tea that he had from Laurent earlier. So my headcanon is that he made Laurent go and get him another boba tea. And Laurent was like, okay, sure. Like, yeah. But they have all the Chinese takeout. And Makoto's just like, why are you over there not doing anything? You should do it too. And Laurent's like, but you're doing such a good job. Laurent's like, why would I do extra work? I work smarter, not harder. You're doing a great job, Makoto. And so, interestingly enough, that's when Cynthia and Abigail show up. Abigail's dress, I could never pull that off. I don't like the really loose-fitting dresses like that, but I would wear what Cynthia has on, especially with the shawl, right? Would do that. And then that's when they see the two brothers and they come over saying it's Abigail. Now, I love the Makoto. The best thing about Laurent and Makoto's relationship is that it keeps going back and forth to Makoto doing all the social media stuff by himself, and Laurent is just sleeping. Laurent knows exactly what he's doing. Laurent, it's so funny because Makoto is so easily riled up, and Laurent is just taking advantage of it. It's like, Makoto, honey, if you treated Laurent, if you didn't play his game and you weren't so easily hooked by him, you could totally get around it, but Makoto just plays right into Laurent's hands. I need Makoto to be suave and cool and to get Laurent's goat. I need that to happen. But as of right now, he just plays right into Laurent's hands. Like, Laurent knows just what buttons to push to get him to get riled up, and he loves it. I'm like, come on. Clark is all like, I love that Clark is talking to Abigail about her being a pilot. And he's like, well, you're a really good pilot. You're all this. He's just such a kid, right? And then Abigail's just having none of it. And then he asks her to come. She's like, oh, well, she's just being nervous next to you. And Clark's like, oh, really? Which she's not being nervous. She just doesn't care. And then he's like, well, come on and get in the pool with me. You don't have to have a suit on to swim. And then I thought she was going to get in with the dress, but she's just like, nope. And Clark's just like, oh, how bold. Like, this was not part of the plan, because Cynthia's like, what are we doing? Like, why'd you do that, Abigail? And Abigail just doesn't seem to have any care. So let's put Abigail right here. And what we know from Abigail is that she does not seem to care. She's pretty apathetic. She is a thrill seeker. And as Laurent says, she's just doing it to eventually die. Because, yeah, she's pretty apathetic. She's like, I don't care. She doesn't have any boundaries or restrictions. So when he asks her to get in the pool, and she's like, fine, I'll just take off the dress. And Clark's like, oh, bold. And Cynthia's like... And I love that this entire pool exchange, it's just her bouncing and swimming in the pool. And Clark's just like, oh! He's like, well, then I'll join the same. I'll do the same. And he just, like, takes off he had no reason to take off his swim trunks. Like, why? No one asked you to. And then he throws it right at Sam's face. It's actually hilarious. And Sam's just getting frustrated about it because he's like, my idiot brother. And so Cynthia comes up over there. I like the whole conversation Cynthia has with him. Like, Abigail's just swimming in the pool, just biding time, and Clark's like bouncing after her like a rabbit. It's actually adorable. But Cynthia making her advances. Again, when she like put the hand down, like kind of getting up on him, and he didn't have a reaction, I was like, maybe you're barking up the wrong tree, Cynthia. Might be just a wee bit. And then they don't even have like a conversation. She eventually leaves with him. And like the Clark's like, oh, well, already? We'll come back soon. He's like, well, come back and we'll play again. I'm like, oh my God, ridiculous. And she comes back into the apartment. I love how everything's illuminated and how like the darkness has like a green tone to it. And Laurent has just been patiently waiting for her to come back. And she talks to Sam on the phone, saying thanks for the drink earlier, and says that she wants to meet up with him tomorrow. And she's like, I got him. And Laurent's been awake this whole time because he gives her the thumbs up. She's like, I'm going to take a shower. And Makoto is not thinking about the con, not thinking about any of that. He's worried that Abigail is not in the best of mental places right now. I do want to make note that while she's in the shower, Cynthia does a thing where she like gargles the water in her mouth and then spits it out. She's a true con artist through and through. Here's the thing. I feel like that's such a metaphor, her taking the water and spitting it out. Because at first, what I honestly thought was that was a metaphor. That was a representation of her, like, how do I phrase it? Giving him a blowjob? I guess that's the best way to say it. Like giving him oral sex. But then I was like, that never happened at the pool scene. So, and this is the same night. So clearly that's not happened yet. But you could take it a number of different ways. That one, it's her like rinsing out her mouth, that all those words she said to him were just a complete and utter lie, right? I've been suspecting that Cynthia has been a lesbian this whole time because of her relationship with Chris from the last episode. So maybe like her like trying to seduce him has been an entire lie because she does not feel that way at all about him. That was my thought post this, because I'm like, she didn't have any sexual encounter with him that night. So my thought is her spitting out, like rinsing her mouth out and spitting it out, is that everything she said to him was a complete lie. And that juxtaposed with Laurent saying she's a con artist through and through. She can lie and do that sort of thing and be manipulative like that. And that's just how she is. Yeah, makes sense. And he tells Makoto that he's like, you're not a peasant. He's like, quit trying to act like you're just this simple kid that's just making his way through the world. He's like, no, you're a con artist and you're a damn good one. You should be using that ability since you got it. Like, use what you got, right? Like, Laurent is telling Makoto not to waste this gift that he has. Don't sell you. And he's also saying don't sell yourself short. He's like, you make yourself sound like a peasant, but he's like, you're better than that. So yeah, Laurent being like, I believe in you more than that. It's like, okay. I love that this show, in very subtle ways, wants you to ship Makoto and Laurent, but it's extremely subtle. Very subtle. And Makoto, all he can think about is how Abbie is. And I love the imagery, the symbolism of Makoto in the light, where he's like, Abbie doesn't seem like a true swindler like you and Cynthia. And we have Laurent in the foreground, in the darkness. We don't see Laurent's face as Makoto says this in the darkness, getting the coffee. He's like, when he says he doesn't seem like a true swindler like you and Cynthia. Here's my thing. Maybe Laurent is not a true swindler. Maybe he's the one pretending. And he knows that Makoto's the real deal. That's kind of what I thought in this scene. Because, one, Laurent being in the darkness opposite of Makoto means that it's not what Makoto thinks. He's like, do you know about Abigail's past or not? And he does. But my thing is, I feel like Laurent, the show's called The Great Pretender. Laurent's the one that's the peasant, that's just getting by, scraping by with the resources of others. And he recognized Makoto's the real deal. So I feel like maybe that's the case, that Laurent is just pretending it's all an act on his part. Because he's like, Makoto's like, it always looks forced. Why is she doing this? And then we cut to Abigail and her past with her cut hair and everything. And so she has and it's a ballet medal. Now it makes sense. Like before, when Makoto took it from her, I didn't catch that it was a ballerina on the medal. It didn't make sense. And now that you see it, it makes more sense. So yeah, it shows her doing her solo, and we see her parents, and then we see these people coming up. Okay. So we get like little tiny bits and pieces that seems like that she was a ballerina and it seems like she had loving parents. It seems like there was a war. Maybe her parents died in the battle, in the conflict. And so Abbie maybe joined the military and nearly died and lost her comrades. I feel like maybe that was the case. My theory is that her parents were involved. Her country was involved in a conflict, and her parents maybe died. And so because of that, it made her join the army there. They got in a conflict. She nearly died. Her comrades died. And so she's been it sounds like she has survivor's guilt. That she has survivor's guilt after all this, and she's just trying to do things. She doesn't want to just kill herself, because that seems like it would be a disservice to her family that died for her, but she just doesn't feel like she understands the point of living anymore because she's survived all this. It's all coming together, right? But we have this race that's really dangerous. And I am glad that finally Laurent gives Makoto the other little Bluetooth thing to be like, look, now you can listen on to. I feel like this is a sign of trust from Laurent by the end of this episode, that he gives Makoto the Bluetooth as well, being like, okay, I trust you. You can listen on as well, so you know what's going on. I feel like that was a sign that he could trust him, right? Saying this is really dangerous. And Laurent's like, it'll be a big deal if there's an accident. And so then it's her turn. But things are not going as planned. And I like that Laurent the whole time, Laurent does not give off any emotion that he's aware that things are going bad. He just kind of looks disgruntled through a lot of it, or indifferent. And so meanwhile, he's listening to Cynthia having the conversation with Sam about the race itself. And they thought that the race was rigged for Abigail to win. And Sam did not do that, right? Luckily, Abigail's a good enough pilot. She pulls it off, right? But this part here, this conversation with Sam, where he's like, oh, did I promise you something? And I was like, okay, so he's not going to let her win easily, right? And the moment that Cynthia like pushed herself up against him, I was like, no, that's not going to work. He has not shown any interest in her at all this entire episode. He's just kind of gone along with it, but he has not shown any interest. I'm like, the moment you try to push too far, he's going to shove back. And that's exactly what he does. But man, this part there where he's like, keep your flabby chest and your lack of morals away from me, which is such a thing, because I'm like, the flabby chest line, I'm like, okay, maybe he's not into ladies. And the other thing is the lack of morals. I'm like, that's such a double standard, because he doesn't have any morals. This whole thing is rigged. It's a big con too. So he kind of has this double standard where it's like, you're being corrupt just as much. So how can you say that she is, right? And he's like, a star with those skills. What a shallow woman. It's laughable. And so he's like, I'm the one that calls the shots in this. And I love that Laurent is having to hear to this whole... Laurent is hearing this entire conversation, and he's just getting more and more disgruntled because it's not going his way. And Laurent gives kind of like a little bit of a Sanji vibe from One Piece off, where he's just like, leave this lady alone. Leave my friend Cynthia alone. And I think Makoto notices that Laurent is disgruntled. Like, Laurent's showing genuine emotion of not having it in this scene, and Makoto's like, why is he not being with this? What's going on? And that's when he gives him the other Bluetooth so he can hear what's happening too. He's like, you want me to take in a fledgling third-rate team? You're 100 years too early. And then he says, you know how many young girls have approached me for my money? And he calls her an old hag. I'm like, oh my God, she's not that old. He's like, air racing is a man's sport. I was like... where we risk our lives. It's like, what do you think Abbie's doing? Abbie's risking her life up there. He says, your fake laugh and your heavy makeup. And then he smashes that. I love that at this point when, yeah. And at this, it was like, okay, you're not being totally sexist. But then he says, women should obediently stay home and do housework. And I'm like, yeah, you've crossed the line. Yeah. And at that point, when he says that line, that's when Laurent goes, and I'm out. He's like, it's scary business when you anger a modern day woman. And Makoto's like, well, what are you going to do? And he's like, well, there's nothing more we can do. It's all up to Abbie now. I wondered if it's a bad thing when you anger a modern day woman. I wonder if that was a jab at Sam too, suggesting that he was being the one that was nagging. I don't know. But then Abigail, bless her heart, she like has the flashback. And so we see that they're all going into this underground compound and she's being trained with this military unit. Poor Abigail. And then they go to invade this base, and it goes horribly wrong. And they shoot the grenade at them. They shoot the bomb at them. And that's when she sees like her comrade on the ground that's dead. And she like throws up in the plane. It's awful. And she almost has that wing touch the water, which would have ruined everything. And that's when, of course, it's very anime that it's Makoto's voice spurning her out of the near fatal accident. But I'll take it because I'm like, I don't want Abigail to get hurt. And it could be that she remembered Makoto in that moment. It could have been just timed up perfectly well, right? That she manages to get out of it. And Clark this whole time, Clark has no clue. I think it's important to note that Clark has no clue. He has no clue about the rigged race. Because he didn't know what Sam was doing. He was just like, oh, look, Abigail won. Isn't that great, brother? And, like, he had no idea. And Laurent's like, oh. And even Cynthia's surprised. They're like, this was not in the book. And Clark, I'm almost rooting. I feel like this whole case is going to end with Clark confessing his love to Abigail and her being like, no. And walking away, being like, I'm not interested. I feel like she's going to be like, thanks, but no thanks. And Clark's going to be heartbroken. Bless his bones. But she manages to beat him just by the skin of their teeth. And here's the thing. when they barely win, and I like that Makoto's all, again, Makoto, outward emotions, is like, yes. And Laurent's like, okay, well, that worked. Well, glad that worked out for us. Good deal. Like, the way that they two, again, they're so meant for each other. Like, Makoto is the outward, externally expressive person, and Laurent's, like, internalizing everything. It's wonderful. But then, yeah, so Clark being like, brother, did you just see that? She's amazing. And then we cut back to Sam, because Clark's so excited to face her now, or to potentially face her. And Abigail's like, okay. And then everybody cheering her on. And so then, yeah, then it's like, whether she's a woman or not, only that girl can make this race exciting. She's the star. And Sam's like, okay, the final match is Clark versus Abigail. And then him looking at Cynthia, and he's like, and she says, I want to apologize for the insult. So she's like, I should have apologized. Sorry about that. But then when he says, he goes, don't misunderstand. I'm in no way sexist towards women. I'm in no way sexist toward women. What a fallacy. I feel like anytime, I'm just going to put this up here. Yes, you are. It's kind of like when someone's like, look, I'm not racist, but like that is exactly the tone that statement had, being like, I am in no way sexist towards women, even though I just told you that your job is to be obedient and work in the house. Not sexist at all. Sure you're not, dude. But yeah, I love it. He's like, quite the contrary. Women are muses for men, because it's not sexist at all. I just don't want to enter a savage battlefield because I'm not sexist at all. And he says that's how it is. However, this doesn't apply if she has skills, because I'm not sexist at all. She's a good pilot. Yeah, I love Cynthia's reaction is my favorite, because she's like, you're such a douche lord. She's just like, she has the face of, you're so full of shit, but sure, Jan, we'll go with that. God, I love it. And so then, yeah. So basically, and then Abigail she just looks awful. She looks like she needs a 10-hour sleep. And then Laurent says, do you want to know why she's doing this? And then Makoto doesn't answer. He says it's in order to die. Mm-hmm. So yeah, we get just enough about Abigail to know that she's had military background. She came from a family, like a loving family. She did ballet, explains like her agileness. She was in the military, which explains like the knowledge and skills that she possesses. And she has had all these bad experiences and is just chasing these thrills in hopes of it finally ending her life. And I feel so bad for her. I want Makoto. I feel like if anybody can reach her, it's Makoto. Because Makoto is like, oh, don't do this, you know? So my hope is that Makoto can reach her. That's my hope anyway. But I feel for her. I feel for her character so much. And I don't know. Again, we didn't get much with the con this episode. We know that they're going to try to swindle them out of $200 million. My theory is that they're going to bet everything on Abbie to win the race. Get Sam to bet $200 million to win the race. And then, but then would Sam bet $200 million? That's the problem. Would he bet that much? I don't think he would. So I don't know if maybe they're going to try to have him bet all this money, and maybe in the meantime, like, this is all a distraction for someone else stealing his money. I don't know. But I feel like Abigail's in a lot of danger because she is putting herself in a very life-threatening situation, knowing that Sam has willingly nearly killed pilots before that were trying to revolt against the outcome of the race. I don't know. Unless, I wonder if Laurent and Cynthia are going to try to say, okay, we'll have Abigail lose the race if you give us X amount of money, like so many $1 million. And then they have it to where everyone is betting on Clark to win, and they bet on Abigail to win, so it's against the odds. Because we've seen how they've done gambling in the past in previous episodes. So maybe they'll take the money that Sam gives them, and then Abigail ends up winning the pot, and they take the money and run. I don't know how they're going to do it. This episode went completely away from the con and did a big character focus on Abigail, and then Laurent and Cynthia and the dynamics of them as a team, and Makoto added to the mix. So it almost seems intentional. They want us to not think about the con, and then it's going to come back in the next episode. So I don't know, but I'm really excited. I'm glad we got this character insight into Abigail, which was really nice. But I have still lots of questions about Laurent. I feel like we're slowly weeding out a little bit more with his character as we go. And Makoto's also helping to weed that out as well. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below about our characters and about this episode. But this was great. This is probably one of my favorite episodes so far. Probably of the episodes we've had, it's probably one of my favorites, especially of this case here. So we'll see. But in any case, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yes, I will be back with lucky number 8, episode 8 of The Great Pretender here very soon. Bye.